Hey everyone in the Reclaiming You Lounge. So I thought this song was really appropriate when we're talking about constipation, release. So it's a song, Agnes. I don't know if you guys remember it. It's quite an old song. I'm thinking at least 12 years ago. But yeah, that's what we want, isn't it? We want to release. So I'll just see if anyone joins me because I know it's a random time and the music might be too loud. So I can see someone's just jumped on. Sharon, hey, how are you? Talking about constipation. How are you going? So I've just got a song, I don't know if you can hear it, but it's about release. I thought that was very appropriate for constipation. Yes, me. I feel like I'm in a dance party. Talking about constipation and release. Anyway, it's good to have a bit of a laugh, isn't it? So, oh good, you've just put a few people in there. Music to my rear. You're very clever. I know, just thought it was really release. I was thinking, what other song can I put when we're talking about, constipation? So I thought I had to be something like release or, maybe that let it go. But anyway, in all seriousness, I know it's a really common condition. So it was interesting. One of the practitioner companies that I've got an account with and that I, buy things through and recommend things through, they'd sent an article on some really common remedies. And I thought, yeah, it's something, that a lot of people do suffer from. They say something like, Cassie, hi, how are you? They were saying something like 25% of Australians suffer from chronic constipation. Chronic, remember, that's more than 3 months that they suffer from it. They say at least 3 times a week for at least 3 months. And I mean, people know if they're constipated. Like I get people that come to me that will say, look, I've been constipated as long as I can remember. And I remember one of the very first ladies that came to me when I was working in the pharmacy. This is back in like 2011. I think the first job I had kind of in this industry, or not in this industry, because obviously it was at Amway before then, but, working as a practitioner. It was, this woman came in and she was only quite a young girl. And I remember she said to me, have you got anything for constipation? And I asked her when she'd had last opened her bowels and she'd said it was 13 days or something. And I remember I was trying not to give away how shocked I was. I thought, oh my gosh. And I remember saying that to her, like, I would really go and I strongly recommend that you go and get that checked out. There could be an obstruction, because obviously there's so many factors that we need to consider. So I'm just going to run through a few of them. But I mean, if you're constipated. But as I said, generally they say chronic is longer than 3 months. Also, there is associated symptoms at times with that. So people, obviously there's a difficulty passing the stool. Also, often people will say they feel like there's an incomplete emptying, like that's quite common as well. There can be, of course, abdominal pain, bloating, hard or lumpy looking stools or, pellety kind of stools. So often, people, I don't know if you've seen that Bristol stool chart. Like if you Google it, Bristol, Bristol, it's a really good little chart and it looks at like type 1 through to type 7 of various stools because, often we don't know what's normal. If we've always had it that certain way, unless there's a change, we don't really know, well, hang on, is that normal? Because people don't often talk about it. So, on this little Bristol stool chart, it will show you, type 1 is like this. That suggests very constipated. And it works right through to type 7, which is where there's a lot of inflammation. That's just basically a liquid consistency, no solid pieces at all. And that's where you might be thinking inflammatory bowel diseases and things like that. So, or, major food allergies or sensitivities. So I think that's a great idea to look at one of those stool charts just to be familiar with what's more normal. So, they sort of say like having more of a smooth, soft sausage or snake is kind of more normal. That's ideally what you want. If it's like a sausage shape with some cracks in the surface, that's generally okay as well. But, obviously if there's a change, you need to go get that checked out. Of course, anything where there's a change from the regular, that's always warrants, well, why? Why is that the case? Has there been a change in diet? Is there, more stress, etc. So that kind of just sort of sets the scene first. But some of the things we need to then consider, of course, well, hey, are you drinking enough water? Because quite often, I mean, look, let's be honest, probably in this kind of arena, like in this circle, most of us are drinking enough water here because it's so drummed into us that it's just now we're used to it, we like it. But, a lot of people aren't drinking much water. I mean, my mum was never a great water drinker. I mean, I have to force her. And I mean, I know with my grandparents, I was always like giving them extra water. Sometimes people just don't like the taste. So I would always start there. Are you hydrated adequately? And not all waters are equal either. And then, of course, you've got to really look at diet. Well, are you having enough fiber? Because let's face it, there's a lot of, ketos and paleos, like a lot of various diets out there where it's higher in fat, it's higher in protein, and you've got to be having enough fiber. And, there's soluble fibers, there's insoluble fibers, some are better than others when it comes to treating more constipation and things like that. But, I know the World Health Organization used to say roughly 30 grams of, fiber per day. And a lot of people are getting half of that if they're lucky. So, that's always something that you really need to look at too. But you don't want to just suddenly go from, minimal fiber to suddenly heaps of fiber, because that will take, that's not going to necessarily go down well. Like you will feel the effects of that. So also you've got to consider, is there, are they getting enough activity? Because, they've shown that in various studies that inactivity and more of sedentary lifestyles can equate to or be correlated with higher incidence of constipation, because it makes sense. You want everything to be moving, the bowels to be moving, the body to be moving. Like these are all just simple common sense things, but it's interesting how, this could be what it is that's causing it. Also, are you actually allowing yourself time to go to the toilet? Because let's face it, people are busy, and I mean, there's certain, people will say, oh, yes, I get up and I go to the toilet straight away, or I have my morning coffee, then I go to the toilet, and that's great. But, sometimes people are in a rush and they kind of just almost start to suppress that signal that the body is giving them to go. And then you can almost override it. And then you can either get to the point where you're busting and you're almost going to have diarrhea, or you just keep suppressing it, and then the sensation sort of goes. So that's not great either, because all of those things, it's trying to like almost override the body's own natural way of showing you, hey, let's go to the toilet. So, they're all things that you've got to consider. Also, there's obviously various medical conditions, like things like hypothyroidism and things like that, that could potentially, constipation is a sign of that. And I remember my grandma, she was living Casino, northern New South Wales, and I know after she passed away, and obviously this is a personal share, but there was quite a lot of laxatives and stuff in her cupboard. And, you kind of think it's interesting, like whether she'd ever said anything to anyone, because sometimes people don't, they're embarrassed by it. They will, go and sort of self-treat, self-medicate. They'll just buy things from pharmacies or whatever. And, there is dangers in that too, because it could be highlighting. So with her, there was hypothyroidism. So, things like that. So, it really is important, obviously, as I said, to discuss it with a healthcare practitioner, because there is things that, you can look at, you can rule out certain things. You can, look at various pathologies and see, well, what's going on? Because quite often, as I said, maybe it is highlighting another issue. It could be structural, it could be mechanical, but it could be highlighting that there's other imbalances. And as we know, stress, of course, exacerbates everything. I mean, they've done studies on that, how meditation and mindfulness can really benefit conditions like IBS. And we know with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, if anyone here has had that, I've had a diagnosis of that many years ago. And generally with IBS, there can be constipation predominant, there can be diarrhea predominant, or there can be like alternating between diarrhea and constipation. And they reckon there's no known cure for IBS, but definitely stress will exacerbate it, which it does with everything. That's why I really kind of want to specialize, and that's my whole thing now, more specializing in stress, because it underpins and exacerbates everything. So with IBS, what they're finding is lower FODMAP diets can be really beneficial. And I'm going to do a training probably in the next few weeks on IBS, or is it actually SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because they reckon that, usually it is actually SIBO which is causing it, but that's a training for another day. But going back to this IBS and FODMAPs. So you guys familiar with FODMAPs? They talk about the various, like fructans and oligosaccharides and the, monosaccharides and the polyols. So, if you look at like the labels on things, even like with chewing gum and various drinks and things that we might say it's got xylitol or mannitol or sorbitol or anything like that, the sugar alcohols, they're problematic for people with IBS quite often, and that's where you get like the bloating and the gas and the wind pain and things like that. That's how I know when I've kind of overdone my limit. So sometimes people will say, I can have like a little bit of bread, I can have a little bit of milk, but anything more than that. And it was like, I remember, do you remember when everyone was going crazy for cauliflower? It's like, oh, cauliflower is the best thing because you don't have to have potato. It's a great substitute. Do cauliflower-based pizzas, use it for everything. I remember the first time I had cauliflower rice. Oh my gosh, I felt like I was so bloated and so gassy. I thought, I was just doubled over in pain. I thought, this is ridiculous. So, you've got to watch that. So if you do have IBS, particularly, as I said, we're talking here obviously about constipation, which there is IBS, constipation predominant types, be really cautious with the FODMAPs. Basically just Google it, but there's certain foods, like garlics and onions and artichokes, asparagus, apples, all of those things are higher. Coconut flour, soy flour, all of that, they're all higher in FODMAPs. So, even ripe bananas. So yeah, you just want to, be mindful of having just a little bit of some of these things and not too much. So as I said, when the world was going crazy for cauliflower rice, this for people with IBS, yeah, definitely not a good option at all. So you can just Google FODMAPs. There's some great charts. I mean, you can reach out and I can give you some info on it. But, definitely FODMAPs can make a difference for people if they're, as I said, not just for, bloating and gas and all that sort of stuff, but if there is constipation, it's worth looking into. Maybe it's the FODMAPs is an issue for you. There's a sensitivity there. As I touched on earlier with the fiber, so the World Health Organization used to recommend about 30 grams a day for adults. So obviously there's different types of fiber. We talk about the soluble fiber, which dissolves in liquids. It's soluble. And that's kind of in, nuts and fruits and oats and things like that, legumes. Then you've got the insoluble fiber, which is kind of found in sort of the skins and seeds of like fruits and veggies and things like that, and, grains and things. What they're finding is soluble fiber, so that's the one we said that dissolves in the liquid, that's the one that's found in legumes and nuts and oats and, fruits, things like that. That will help soften and bulk the stool because, that's what we want. We want to be able to soften it, we want to be able to bulk it. And that's actually shown better results in reducing constipation than insoluble fiber. So that's just an interesting little fact there. And they've found that if you do have IBS, which as we said, there can be the constipation predominant type with IBS, insoluble fiber, which is like the skins and the seeds of things, can actually make that constipation worse. So, sometimes when people have had diverticulitis and diverticulosis and things like that, they'll say avoid nuts, avoid seeds, avoid, all of that. And potentially that could be why. So, lowering insoluble fiber intake can be something to trial for those with constipation from having a slower bowel transit time, or if there's like pelvic floor dysfunction. So as I said, you wouldn't go from having minimal fiber to having shitloads of fiber because your body just won't cope. So it's sort of something you would do gradually, or you'd work in with your healthcare practitioner. So the other thing is psyllium can be really quite useful. Psyllium husks, it's gluten-free. Metamucil, that's kind of a brand people are very familiar with, particularly in the pharmacy space. Just watch that. The natural one's okay, but you can just get natural psyllium because I think some of the, I know when I used to look at them when I was working in the pharmacy, some of the Metamucils do have like sunset red, like various additives and, preservatives and things like that. So obviously don't go there, just get natural psyllium. That could be worth trying. And there was a clinical trial, and there was something like 275 patients that had IBS. So most of them had IBS constipation predominant type. So 10 grams of psyllium fiber per day reduced a lot of the self-reported abdominal pain and discomfort. So significantly greater than the placebo. So that's kind of also worth noting. I quite like the Woolworths Macro Cleanse. That's kind of got psyllium and linseed and things like that too, because ground flaxseed can also be useful for people. And obviously with any of these, you want to make sure you are having enough water. Now, you know how there's that old wives' tale, I'll just have some prunes. Prunes will help everything. Yes, it can, but prunes are also high in FODMAPs. So if there is that sensitivity there with FODMAPs, which as I said, there is definitely with me, that can cause more harm in ways. So, that's just sort of something, because yes, some studies have shown that prunes can significantly increase stool frequency and consistency. But if there is a FODMAP sensitivity, which is more and more common, then, it may cause some issues. So, hey, Sue and Liz, I can see a few other people have just jumped on. So we've covered a few things already. We've looked at sort of certain conditions and, fiber and actually giving yourself time to go to the toilet and, having enough water per day. So they've also shown that in various studies that, having less water, like if you're only having like 2 cups a day, you'll have less stool frequency and less stool weight than those that are having closer to the 2 liters. So, you want to make sure that that's something that's, a daily thing. Now, probiotics. So we know probiotics, there's so much information coming out now on the importance of probiotics. And for a long time, people weren't really across it. They weren't including it in their diets. But there's more and more research on specific strains. So there was one study, and this is people with functional bowel symptoms like constipation. So one group, there was probably, I think they said 33, 35 patients received Bifidobacterium animalis lactis. So that was at a dose of 17 billion CFU. Then there was another group and roughly the same amount of patients, and they received the same probiotic strain, but only at 1.8 billion CFU. This is per day, by the way. The third group just got placebo. What they found is those that had the Bifidobacterium lactis showed significantly faster transit times on x-rays and things compared to the Marisol compared to the before treatment. And the highest improvement was, or the highest benefit was in the higher dose. So that's sort of something else that's interesting when you look at, there's other strains as well, but this is just a particular study. I spoke about stress. So, obviously we know chronic stress will have a flow-on effect, of course, affecting your digestive system. When you're in fight or flight, the digestive system essentially just shuts down because it's like, what? You need to be ready to fight. You need to be ready to flee. So let's just shut down the digestive system because it's not a priority at this point when we're fighting for our lives, So it is definitely going to alter your gut microbiota as well as the nerve function in the intestines. So, mindfulness, meditation, all of that is key to really helping with the health of the bowels, but the whole body in general. We spoke about, there's more issues with being sedentary and low activities and a higher incidence of constipation. Now, abdominal massage, I remember when I studied, so when I did my first year of naturopathy, which I ended up, and I've probably told that story before, I ended up moving from naturopathy to, I did straight herbal medicine and straight nutritional medicine because with naturopathy there was so much massage, and we had this teacher and he was very hairy and we had to practice on him, and I just thought it was so gross which sounds funny, but anyway, so I ended up, I'm like, no, I'd rather do an extra year of herbs, an extra year of nutrition so I don't have to massage him. Anyway, I remember we did some abdominal massage, and I swear all of us needed to go to the toilet straight away. So abdominal massage, it's been used to treat chronic constipation for, I'm going to say, hundreds of years. Also, good old castor oil packs, that can be useful too. So, there's some great YouTube videos on how you can prepare for a castor oil pack, but you can place that in certain areas, and that can also just help get things moving. Of course, years ago, people used to take it internally, but that can be a little bit aggressive. Olive oil is the same sort of concept, but you can do definitely, as I said, abdominal massages. And once again, there's some YouTube videos to show you the flow and because obviously you want to do it in line with the ascending, transverse, descending colon. So you want to move in line with that. You don't want to go against it. So make sure you're doing it in the right direction, but they can all be useful. And, they say sometimes just elevating your feet slightly when you are sitting on the toilet, that can also help getting you in a certain position, which makes it easier to go. And then, as I said, when it comes to over-the-counter remedies, sometimes people go for Metamucils and things like that. That can be okay. Then there's like softening laxatives, osmotic sort of laxatives, which is kind of getting the bowel to hold more water. And then there's stimulant laxatives like senna and things like that. Obviously, as I said, working with your healthcare practitioner, because there's definitely pros and cons to all of that. And you don't want to end up with, a lazy bowel because, excessive use will worsen it. Absolutely. Now, let's get into the juice, let's get into some of the treatments that, might be useful for you. So, some of the things, as I said, obviously we know magnesium, so magnesium oxide, magnesium citrate, things like that can be useful. Sometimes you need to do a higher dose up front. I remember there's a colon cleanse product, and I think it's just a straight magnesium oxide, and people used to love that when I was in the health food store in the pharmacy. But, with any of these things, working with your healthcare practitioner. So let's look at some of these treatments. So we've spoken about some of the probiotic strains. Also, research has shown, in line with these probiotics we've been talking about, adults with constipation do seem to have fewer bifidobacterium and fewer lactobacillus species than those that have normal bowel movement. So it is definitely worth looking into probiotics. Something else, you might be familiar with this, you might not. Partially hydrolyzed guar gum, so PHGG. That is a soluble non-gelling fiber. That has been shown to help with increasing the stool bulk and the moisture content. So that could be something that's worth exploring. And also it has prebiotic benefits, which, as we know, will help increase the numbers of this bifidobacterium and lactobacillus. That's what has been shown in clinical trials. And of course, when we're modifying the microbiome with things like this partially hydrolyzed guar gum, it usually is one of the ways or the mechanisms that does, have a beneficial effect on constipation in adults, in children, in the elderly, in, IBS and things like that. So that's definitely worth looking at. Something else, which this is something that, it's an old wives kind of, remedy or old school remedy, slippery elm. Now, slippery elm, it's very, mucilaginous. I don't know if you guys have tried it. But what it does is it kind of traps the water and it starts to swell. And it creates this kind of gel-like compound. And this can increase stool bulk as well as helping to reduce constipation. And it's one of those clever kind of bark powders that can help with both constipation and diarrhea. And we know that also these mucilaginous kind of properties and, supplements or, that contain this mucilaginous kind of property are also prebiotics. So as we said, once again, that's going to give you the fuel for helping with the growth and the proliferation of some of these good microbes. Something else is turmeric. So we often think about turmeric as a anti-inflammatory. And yeah, it's great. It's an antioxidant, it helps with detox pathways, all the things. But it's also a choleretic, which means it can increase bile production in the liver. And it's interesting, I remember I had someone who'd said that to me. Like, occasionally people will say that they take turmeric supplements and it really makes them go to the toilet more. And it could be for this reason, that, as I said, it has that choleretic action. And it can also then, by that mechanism, help with regulating the gut microbiome. So they did this study and they found that curry with turmeric versus curry without turmeric, they showed that the curry that had the turmeric really helped with reducing small bowel transit time and really helped increase breath hydrogen levels, which indicated it had a really good effect on the motility and, the microbial fermentation there. Something else, which, something that people will try, and definitely there's mixed results, but aloe vera, so that has been clinically trialed. So you know how you can buy aloe vera gels and juices and things like that. Obviously, don't get the one that has added ingredients. You want to try and minimize the uses of preservatives and other additives that they might have in there. But that can also improve the water contents of the stool and decrease bowel transit time and improve the whole, profile of the microbiome. So, and I know over the years people have said that if they, if they have a little shot before bed, they find that just helps them feel, less bloated, less gassy. So, with everything, different things work for different people because obviously there's different reasons as to why people are presenting with those symptoms. Also, so yes, definitely we've discussed the partially hydrolyzed guar gum, the slippery elm, the turmeric, the aloe vera. All those things can help with providing that, relief of constipation. So, as I said, I will leave you on that note because I do have my next appointment is at 2:00, but I just wanted to jump in because, look, it is so common. You know, so many people suffer from this, and sometimes it is just the basics. Are you moving every day? You know, are you having enough water? Are you having enough fiber in your diet? Are you giving yourself a chance to go to the toilet? You know, you're not sort of like overriding your body's signaling. And then, of course, you can look at other factors. You know, is there kind of IBS? Is there, you know, an alteration in the gut microbiome? And, you know, let's maybe look at ways that we can introduce some of these, you know, mucilaginous things, these prebiotics, these probiotics. So, you know, there is so many things that you can do. So, but as always, it's always bio-individuality. So on that note, I will love you and leave you. I will get in, when will I be in next? Well, Monday night, obviously I've got the guided meditation, and next Wednesday, I think people are liking the psychic healings and readings. So I'll definitely commit to continue doing that on a Wednesday night. And then next week I'm doing a training on, this is just for us women, vaginal health. So it's something else that I want to discuss because, you know, so many people present with imbalances there. And, you know, it's something that there's things that you can do. So, and there's some really good testing that's come out. So Naturopath have sent me some more information on some new labs. So you can, because you know how in the past, if things weren't right, you go and get a swab at the doctors and, oh yes, there's candida or whatever. But, you know, things like bacterial vaginosis, like BV, it's really common. And, you know, there's certain things that you can definitely look out for and certain things you can try. So that's my training next Thursday. But I love you and leave you. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend. And I will see you Monday night for our guided meditation. And I'll do it on the digestive system because that's what we've been talking about. So anyway, much love and see you soon.